our final rankings of the season for the Overwatch League. The playoffs are upon us. Here to break down the power rankings for one final time, Arda Ocal with Darin Kwilinski and Emily Rand joins us in Los Angeles. Much of the same at the top spot. San Francisco Shock, still the kings of our power rankings, still the kings of Overwatch League. Darin, let's start with you. How do they keep their top spot? And at this point, they must be the favorites going into the season playoffs.
I think that's fair. You have the Titans and the Shock as your safe bets heading into the overall playoffs. I don't think that you would be smart putting money on anything else. They do have a little bit of a tall order this weekend at the LA Homestand. They do have the Vancouver Titans to kick off day one, and then they have Valiant, who are looking for a single win to get into the playoffs. Now, we'll get to the Valiant later, I believe. You know, it really does look like the Titans and the Shock, because the old guard of the Overwatch League, the NYXL, the Londons, they have kind of fallen off in 2-2-2. And despite their amazing records, you have surging teams who are a little bit younger. You have Atlanta Reign, you have the Guangzhou Charge, and I think that that's what you're going to see. You're going to see some of those newer names because the 2-2-2 has benefited them more than some of that old guard.
Well, speaking of the old guard, last year's season finalists, the Philadelphia Fusion, jumped the most in our power rankings. 17th last week, jumping up to 9th.
Still higher than the Defiant.
Let's not talk about that, okay? That is off the script. Emily, this would normally be a huge jump. They upset Seoul in our last week's worth of games, but why is this not as impressive as it may seem?
So this week's power rankings are actually really weird. You'll notice an absence of the Washington Justice as well, who have slowly crept up through this stage and ended with a kind of shocking 6-1 record to finish off their stage. The weird thing about this week is that we didn't rank teams that are already out of playoff contention completely, and then that leaves only a certain amount of teams at the top. Some of them didn't even play, like NYXL and Vancouver didn't play this past week. And then going into the homestand, only a select few teams are remaining to play. So it's kind of a weird week for power rankings. The thing I do want to point out about Philly, and I know Darin has other notes on this, but Philly's problem, I guess, this entire stage, and even previously, isn't that they necessarily lack the talent, but the problem is that they've never been able to put it together consistently. In fact, every single Philly match that I recall watching, and maybe it's just like PTSD from these long matches, but every single one has gone to map 5, and it's been incredibly messy regardless of whether Philly have won or lost. So you mentioned that they were finalists last year. If they want to make any sort of run this year, they're going to need to be significantly more consistent than what we've seen out of them all season.
Darin, you agree?
Totally agree. To mention on Emily's point, it was 3-2 Guangzhou, 3-2 Chengdu in week 1. So close matches. Guangzhou's obviously doing very well this stage. Chengdu can be a coin flip because of how wacky they can be, which I know Emily
They
enjoys.
give me fits every power ranking. I'm just like, where do we fit this team in? Like, sometimes they shoot themselves in the foot. Other times they look insanely good.
Well, speaking of fits, that was one of the reasons why Philly, I think, looked a little inconsistent against Seoul. It was because Fit was at he
terrible.
he was
Fitz
one of the
isn't
ones
terrible.
that
The pun
anchored.
is terrible, by the way. Guys.
He was one of the ones that kind of held them together. However, when Philly did find cohesion, when they were utilizing their ults correctly and snowballing as a group in the right ways, finding those picks, they did look better than Seoul, but there were some individual plays that kept Seoul into it, and that was what kind of deconstructed Philly in some of those team fights and that inconsistency that Emily was talking about.
How about Atlanta finally getting some love in the top 5? So, got to give you some credit, Darin. We had a somebody's must go situation. You called it with Washington. They lost it. But take a second to go ahead. It's okay.
Look,
This
I know
is
how
the
to
only
do
time
my
you'll
job.
get it
I know.
this
This is
season.
it. Look, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while, right?
Well, building on that, they swept London. They're 5-0, one of the only undefeated teams this stage going into the LA homestand. They are 4th in our power rankings, so they have climbed up. So how does this momentum continue for Atlanta, and what does this mean for the overall playoffs? Are they a force to be reckoned with?
Yes. I believe so. They are one of the teams that has benefited the most from 2-2-2. I think Baby Bay specifically had some really good plays with Widowmaker in that match against Washington. Then again, Corey came back and stole some of his own Widowmaker highlights. I think Atlanta at 4 overall and being a solid team to watch and to root for. You're not going to go wrong if you want to root for Atlanta, I think, in the playoffs. They did exactly what I told everyone what was going to happen when Washington went up against an actually good team. They beat them pretty handily. So, you know, between them and other playoff teams, I think Atlanta's going to be one of those middle of the road teams. I don't think they can break into top 3. I think Guangzhou has an edge on them. They actually beat them earlier this year. And then Shock and Vancouver are just too good. Again, I think you're still going to see Titans and Shock in the finals. Now, don't know how the bracket looks at, but yeah, Atlanta's middle of the road. They're good. They're solid.
Yeah.
Maybe they get a Cinderella run.
Yeah, I think the thing with Atlanta to keep in mind in terms of like their recent run and then also what we've seen from them in the entire season, right? Like going into, like even though obviously DeFran is no longer there, Baby Bay has stepped into that DPS role since he left. When this roster was first formed, everyone was like, wow, there's a ton of individual talent on here on a hybrid lineup. You know, how are they going to come together? People were comparing them to Philly a lot. Talking to players on the team, specifically Masa and Dogman, they've both admitted to me that this team is very like momentum focused. They're a very emotional team. And I think another thing that you're seeing from Atlanta this stage is that they are benefiting from scheduling, right? Like there's a strong chance that at the LA homestand this week, they end up with an undefeated stage because they face Dallas and then they face Boston, who are two teams that are, you know, have been really, really struggling as of late. And neither of them are in playoff contention. So prior to playoffs, like it sounds like a broken record with some of these teams, but I think Atlanta is another one of those teams that you're looking at and you're like, okay, how are they going to find consistency? However, since they are a bit of a streaky team, it would be really interesting to see if they can put together a run just based off of like pure momentum. Because of the teams I'm looking at going into playoffs, that would actually be a very Atlanta thing to do, just talking to their players and the way they've been all season.
Let's talk about homestands. Atlanta, of course, had the last homestand. We are coming up to the Kit Kat rivalry weekend. Los Angeles getting a homestand. And in my opinion, this is a dream schedule for any Overwatch League homestand. Why, you ask? You have the top 2 teams competing, San Francisco and Vancouver. You have the other undefeated Stage 4 team in Atlanta, also in competition. Then you have the hometown LA Valiant hosting the homestand weekend, battling for that final playoff spot. And their fate is in their hands. It's between them and Chengdu. LA Valiant win, and they're in. The map differential is in their favor. All they have to do is win 1 game. But they have 2 very difficult matches. Why? Because they're playing the number 1 team in Overwatch, the San Francisco Shock, and then they're playing the rival LA Gladiators, who already have a playoff spot in hand and would love nothing more than to play spoiler for the other Los Angeles team. I am looking forward to this homestand weekend a lot, Darin.
I can only get so excited. You pumped me up, and I'm like, I was so focused on this and the power rankings. Now I just want to get to the homestand.
Yes.
I can't even be there this weekend.
By the way, speaking of the homestand, the Gladiators are in 5th, the Valiant are in 6th, and Chengdu are in 10th position, rounding out the top 10. But give us some predictions. We have 1 playoff spot left. Darin, what will happen at homestand weekend?
Well, I think overall the Gladiators have been a little bit inconsistent in their record. It shows they're 3-3. They've you know, they had a win against NYXL, who's still a good team on paper, right? But in the same weekend, they lost to Houston. That doesn't quite bode well for your confidence of, going to beat NYXL, but then lose to Houston, who has been consistently bad this stage. Whereas NYXL has at least shown some flashes of NYXL stuff. You know, still, their schedule has been a little bit tougher than Valiant's. Valiant's schedule has been Paris and Dynasty, which they lost to, Fuel, Mayhem, who aren't terrible this stage, and Boston. And I think Valiant at 4-1, their record is a little bit more deceiving than the 3-3 Gladiators. If I had to bet on it, I would say Gladiators take this over Valiant. But if the Valiant want to get into the playoffs, they have to win this. They have to fight tooth and nail for it, because I don't see them beating the Shock in day 2. So day 1 is going to be their only real shot to get to the playoffs.
Emily, you agree?
Yeah, I think, it's far more likely that they beat the Gladiators than the Shock. Just the Shock are looking, we've mentioned the Titans in the same breath, but am actually of the opinion that the Shock have been the best team this entire year, if you look at the summation of their parts, and they've transitioned incredibly well into 2-2-2 with the way they've used their roster. So
she called it for the longest time.
I did. I was like, you know who it
Shock
is? It's
the best team.
It was like, what, in
just
stage
waiting
2 or something? Yeah. But no, like that aside, I think the cool thing about the Valiant is that we've watched them improve since the roster changes that they made. We've seen incredible performances from Kareev. I think Fact Fiction has played really well and has been a great fit for this team. And we've seen where we've talked about other teams' inconsistencies, I actually think we've seen the Valiant kind of slowly but steadily improve. So I think they have, their destiny is in their own hands. I think when you're looking at them matching up against the Gladiators, the thing you're really going to have to watch out from the Gladiators is their May Reaper combo, because I think they have a really strong understanding of how they want to play that, more so than most other OWL teams, actually. But that's their in, right, is that Gladiators matchup. And given how, the Gladiators have looked, again, like we've talked about a lot of inconsistencies with a lot of teams this stage in particular, because people have been adjusting to the 2-2-2 roll lock. And while the Gladiators came out and kind of made a statement when in the first week where you had the mimetic 2 DPS in the league thing, I think that they have been a bit inconsistent. I do like their understanding of May Reaper. But this is the Valiant's opening, I guess, because I don't see them beating the Shock, and it will be like an incredibly stunning upset if they manage to pull that off.
Let's take a look at the top 10 one more time. Here it is: San Francisco, Vancouver, Guangzhou, Atlanta, LA Gladiators, LA Valiant, London, Hangzhou, Philly, and finally Chengdu. That is what we say. What do you say? Let us know in the comments of this video. And while you're at it, don't forget to click that subscribe button. And don't forget that continued esports coverage is available at ESPN.com/esports.